Good morning. How many of us have ever felt like the odd one out just for trying to do the right thing? Have you ever walked into a room and known that your values made you stand apart? Have you ever wondered if it's even worth it to live by faith when the world seems to reward everything but it? Title: It is easier not to be a Christian in this world. This is a hard one to say out loud. But it's true, and truth, as Brené Brown reminds us, is often uncomfortable and always necessary. We live in a world that runs fast on performance, image, and success. And Christianity, real Christianity, asks us to slow down, to live differently, to love radically, to forgive constantly, and to carry burdens that don't always come with applause. So today, we're going to talk about that. Not with judgment, not with shame, but with courage, with honesty, and with the kind of clarity that can only come when we stop pretending that the easy path is the right one. Good morning. How many of us have ever walked into a room and wondered, do I really belong here? How many times have we been tempted to shrink ourselves just enough to blend in, not because we wanted to, but because it felt safer? And how often have we traded authenticity for acceptance, telling ourselves it's just easier that way? The truth is, it is easier to fit in, but we weren't made for easy. We were made for belonging. Brené Brown teaches us that fitting in is the greatest barrier to belonging, and that's something the Christian life makes painfully clear. Because to be a Christian in this world is to belong to something so deeply, so holy, that it changes how you move through the world, and the world doesn't always like that. Let's get real for a minute. Being a Christian doesn't win you popularity contests. It doesn't guarantee a smoother life or more likes on what you believe. In fact, it often means being misunderstood, misrepresented, sometimes even mocked. Because the way of Jesus, the way of grace, mercy, and radical love is countercultural. While the world says, fit in, be who they want you to be, Christ says, come as you are, be who I made you to be. And that invitation, it sounds beautiful, but it's terrifying, because being who God made you to be living from that place of identity often means standing alone. Not because you want to, but because belonging to Christ sometimes means you'll never quite fit in with the world. When Jesus walked this earth, he didn't fit in. He didn't play by the rules of status, image, or power. He saw the unseen. He touched the untouchable. He spoke to women, to outcasts, to sinners, to children, and called them beloved. So no, it's not easy. It's not easy to belong in a world that keeps asking you to perform, pretend, and perfect. But here's the promise. Belonging to God is worth every moment you feel like you don't fit in. Because fitting in changes who you are. But belonging changes the world. So the next time you're tempted to silence your faith to keep the peace, or shrink your convictions to avoid the conflict, remember this: you were not called to be comfortable. You were called to be courageous, and courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is just quietly showing up as who you truly are, even when it costs you. Because while it may be easier not to be a Christian in this world, it is far more beautiful, far more powerful, and far more eternal to belong to the one who calls you his own. Good morning again. Let me ask you something we don't like to say out loud. Have you ever stayed silent because speaking up for your faith felt like too much? Have you ever known what was right, and still chose what was easy? Yeah, me too. Because here's the truth we don't print on t-shirts or post with pretty filters. Conviction has a cost, and being a Christian, a real one, not just in name, not just in Sunday appearances, means living with that cost every single day. We live in a culture that's allergic to discomfort. We've been taught to avoid conflict, dodge difficult conversations, and do whatever it takes to stay nice. But Jesus didn't call us to be nice. He called us to be faithful. And sometimes, being faithful looks like standing in a room full of people who disagree with everything you believe, and still choosing to love them but not lie to them, not hide, not dilute your convictions to keep the peace. Conviction is about choosing truth when it's unpopular. It's about living a life of integrity even when no one is clapping. It's about having the courage to disappoint others, even people you love, because you refuse to disappoint God. Now, hear me clearly, conviction is not cruelty. It's not about yelling louder or judging harder. That's not Jesus. That's just ego dressed up in religious language. True conviction is grounded in humility. It's knowing that our job is not to win arguments, it's to live out a love so radical that people wonder what's different about us. But even then, it's hard, because when you choose integrity over acceptance, there will be days you feel lonely. When you say no to the things the world says are normal, casual dishonesty, selfish ambition, revenge, you will feel like you're walking uphill while everyone else is coasting. That's because you are. You're walking the narrow road, the one Jesus talked about, the one that costs more, but also the one that leads to life. The world will offer you comfort, but conviction will give you character. The world will offer applause. But conviction will give you peace, the deep, soul-level kind that doesn't come from being right, but from being rooted in something greater than yourself. So yes, it is easier not to be a Christian in this world. It's easier to blend in, it's easier to stay quiet, it's easier to avoid the cost, but ease isn't what we were made for. We were made to carry the light, and sometimes carrying the light means standing in the dark on purpose. So, if you feel the tension between your convictions and your comfort, you're not doing it wrong, you're probably doing it right. Hold fast, speak truth, and let your life preach louder than any words ever could. Good morning again. Let's pause for a moment and just breathe, because what we're about to talk about, it's heavy, and it should be. Let me ask you something simple but soul-searching. Have you ever been so overwhelmed by the pain in the world that you just shut down? Have you ever looked at someone's suffering and thought, I can't hold this, it's too much? Have you ever turned the channel, scrolled past, or changed the subject because staying felt like drowning? Me too, because here's the raw, uncomfortable truth. Compassion is costly, and Christianity doesn't give you permission to look away. We don't often say it this way, but I will. It is easier not to be a Christian in this world, because a real Christian doesn't get to stay numb. We are called to feel, to enter into the ache of others, to sit in grief that doesn't belong to us and carry burdens we didn't create. The word compassion means to suffer with. And if we're honest, most of us don't want to suffer with anyone. We want to fix, we want to solve, or if that doesn't work, we want to flee. But Jesus didn't fix everything on the spot. He sat with people, he touched lepers, he wept at a grave, he listened to women the world's silence. He loved people in the mess and stayed in it with them. That kind of compassion is exhausting. It breaks your heart open. It rearranges your priorities. It means letting go of comfort and convenience and picking up someone else's pain even when it would be easier to walk away. Christian compassion is not pity, it's not performance, it's presence. It's staying in the room when someone is falling apart. It's making a meal when you're tired. It's forgiving again when you have every right to hold a grudge. It's choosing empathy over judgment even when it hurts. And listen, it does hurt. There's a reason Jesus said, take up your cross. Because love like this always costs something. So why do it? Why keep showing up in a world that will never fully repay your kindness? Because when you carry compassion, you carry Christ. And when the world sees that kind of love, selfless, unflinching, inconvenient love, it sees a glimpse of the kingdom. So yes, it's easier not to be a Christian. It's easier to stay numb, to protect your heart, to care less. But we were never called to an easy life. We were called to a full one, even if it breaks us wide open. Because broken hearts surrendered to God become vessels of healing. Good morning again. Let me ask you something honest. How often do you feel the pressure to have your life together, or at least look like you do? How often do you measure your worth by how in control you feel over your schedule, your image, your emotions, your future? We live in a world that tells us, control it, fix it, hustle for it, earn it. If you just work hard enough, plan well enough, stay disciplined enough, you can manage everything. But Christianity doesn't buy that. In fact, Christianity turns it upside down. Because while the world says control is strength, Jesus says surrender is freedom. And I'll be real with you, surrender is one of the most terrifying words I know. It means letting go of what you thought you had handled. It means loosening your grip when everything in you wants to tighten it. It means trusting in a God you can't see more than in a plan you can measure. No wonder it's easier not to be a Christian, because the world rewards control. But faith asks you to let go before the outcome is clear. We are addicted to certainty. We want guarantees. We want 5-year plans and backup plans and insurance policies for our insurance policies. But then Jesus walks in and says, take nothing for the journey, just follow me. Just follow without needing to know every step in advance, without needing proof it will all work out, without needing to be the one holding the map. That's not weakness, that's surrender, and surrender is sacred. Now let me be clear, surrender is not passivity. It doesn't mean we stop showing up, stop working, stop caring. It means we show up without pretending to be in control of things we never were. It's admitting, I'm not God. I can't fix everything. I don't have to prove myself every moment of every day. It's saying, God, I trust you more than I trust my plans. God, I release what was never mine to begin with. God, even here, especially here, I will follow. Friends, surrender is not a one-time act. It's daily, it's moment by moment, and it is not easy. But here's the truth. What control promises you peace, safety, success it can never fully deliver. But what surrender offers real rest, deep trust, soul. Level freedom is something the world can't take away. So yes, it's easier to stay in control. It's easier to cling, to strive, to hustle. But the kind of life Jesus offers, it begins where your grip ends. Surrender is not losing. It's coming home to a God who never asked you to do it all, only to trust him through it all. Good morning once again. Let me ask you something tender. Have you ever felt foolish for hoping? Have you ever looked around at the pain in the world, at the war, the injustice, the heartbreak, and thought, what's the point? Have you ever felt like protecting your heart was easier than believing it could ever get better? You're not alone, because here's the thing, it is easier to be cynical than hopeful, and it is much easier not to be a Christian in a world that makes hope feel naive. Hope in this culture gets a bad reputation. It's seen as soft, unrealistic, maybe even weak cynicism, though cynicism is cool. It keeps people at a distance. It says, I'm not going to be surprised or disappointed because I already assume the worst. But hope, real, rugged, biblical hope, is not weak. It is one of the most defiant acts of faith you can make. Christian hope is not denial. It doesn't pretend everything is fine. It sees the brokenness and still believes redemption is possible. That's why it's so hard. Because hope risks disappointment. Hope opens the heart. Hope says, even when I don't see it, even when I don't feel it, I will believe that God is still at work. And that kind of hope, it costs something. In a world where despair is easy and numbness is a shield, hope asks you to stay awake. Hope keeps your heart open when the safer thing would be to shut it down. Hope demands that we keep believing for healing, for justice, for reconciliation, for resurrection. And yes, the world will look at you sideways. It will say, grow up, get real, lower your expectations. But here's the truth. Hope is not pretending. Hope is remembering. It's remembering that Jesus walked out of a grave. It's remembering that light still breaks through the darkest night. It's remembering that even when the news is bad, even when the story feels stuck, God is not done. You see, it's easier not to hope. It's easier to detach, but we weren't made for easy. We were made for resurrection. And resurrection, people don't run from tombs, they stand in front of them and believe in life. So yes, it's easier not to be a Christian in a world like this. But Christians, real, rooted, surrendered Christians, carry something this world desperately needs. Not optimism, not platitudes, but hope that holds steady in the storm. Hope that aches with the world and still believes. Hope that dares to whisper, it won't always be like this. Hope that lives like the kingdom is already breaking in because it is. Good morning, one last time. Can I ask you something vulnerable? Who told you who you are? Was it your performance, your title, your past, your pain? Because in the world we live in, identity is a moving target. You're only as good as your last win, your last post, your last mistake, and that pressure. It's exhausting. We're taught from a young age, earn it, prove it, be impressive, be liked, be successful, or at least look like you are. So much of our worth, our identity, becomes tied to how well we meet expectations, our own and everyone else's. But then comes Jesus, and he doesn't say, impress me. He says, abide in me. He doesn't say, earn your place. He says, you already belong. That is radically different, and let me tell you something. It is easier not to believe that. Because everything in this world conditions us to believe our worth is performance-based. It's easier to keep striving, to measure yourself by your output, to hustle for love, for approval, for meaning. But Christianity says you are not what you do, you are not what's been done to you, you are not your resume, you are not your reputation, you are who God says you are, and he says chosen, beloved, forgiven. Free, now that sounds beautiful, but let's be honest, it's hard to live like it's true. Because grace is hard to receive when you've been trained to earn everything. Because unconditional love is terrifying when you're used to conditions. But this is the core of our faith. God gives identity and it cannot be taken. It cannot be undone by your failure. It cannot be inflated by your success. It is secure because it's not built on you. The world says, become someone. Jesus says, you already are. So yes, it is easier not to be a Christian. It's easier to find your worth in what you do. It's easier to base your identity on what people say about you. But when all of that falls apart, and it will what's left, only this, a God who looks at you in your most unpolished, unedited, unworthy moments and says, you are mine. No striving, no pretending. No earning, just grace, and maybe that's the most courageous thing of all, to believe that you are loved exactly as you are, and still called to become everything he made you to be.